Hello and welcome to another episode of Way Out of History. I am your host, Aaron Baker, where in this podcast we are going to explore different aspects of history, American history, world history, and even personal history, where we will hear people's testimonies and maybe even my own of how they came into encounter with Jesus and it just completely changed their lives. I am a Bible-believing Christian, and I believe that it's very important to know all aspects of our history, where we come and where we have came from and where are we going. To understand that better, we have to know the history of such things. So, today we are going to have a doozy of a story. Some of you might have heard of this before, and some of you, just might not. I've heard it once or twice, but every time I read it, it just completely blows my mind. And today we're going to talk about when America nearly nuked the moon. I've gotten some articles from the New York Post and even history.com. So, without further ado, let's dive right in and why and when America nearly nuked the moon. So, it's 1958. The American public are gripped in a state of fear and anxiety after a recent Soviet launch of Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. Ever since the end of World War II, the U.S. and Soviets have been locked in an ever-escalating nuclear arms race that has now evolved into a space race. At this point in time, the Soviets have been winning the race, and it seems that the U.S. is technologically falling behind their Cold War rivals. America desperately needs to turn the tide. And so what's their answer to this? How are they going to do it? Well, to do that, they need a show of strength to not only boost morale at home and raise national confidence, but also remind the world why they are the dominant superpower. But what does it look like to win? In our timeline, it took the form of Apollo 11 moon landings, when America successfully placed the first humans on the moon on July 20th, 1969. However, man might not have taken that small step if the U.S. had instead decided to take action another of its own, under Project A119. The U.S. Air Force put the top-secret project into motion around May 1958. It had the unthreatening and innocuous title of, get this, A Study of Lunar Research Flights, and was led by Leonard Rifle, a leading physicist who would go on to hold the position of Deputy Director of the Apollo program at NASA. Rifle was asked by the Air Force to fast-track the project to investigate the visibility and effects of a theoretical nuclear explosion, on the surface of the moon. From the beginning, Rifle knew the project was politically motivated. Speaking to Observer in 2000, he stated it was clear the main aim of the proposed detonation was a PR exercise and a show of one-upmanship. The Air Force wanted a mushroom cloud so large it could be visible on Earth. So they wanted a mushroom cloud so big on the moon that we could visibly see it on Earth in 1950s. The idea was that such a display of force demonstrating America's advanced weaponry could have intimidated the Soviet Union, reassured the American public of their country's nuclear capabilities, and put the U.S. back in pole position all in one swoop. And so, you're probably wondering, just how far did this project go? Well, Rifle headed up a 10-person team that included Gerard Cooper, the man now considered by many as the father of modern planetary science, and a young Carl Sagan, an astronomer who would go on to claim celebrity status with his television work. Whilst applying for the Miller Institute Graduate Fellowship to Berkeley in 1959, Sagan disclosed information about the top-secret project. Although the world would not be aware of its existence at the time, the fact that Sagan or Sagan, had written about Project A119 or A119 meant that a breadcrumb trail had been left, one that was picked up by writer K.A. Davidson whilst he was working on Sagan's biography in the late 1990s, almost 40 years later. When his book hit the shelves, Rifle decided to go on the record to clarify some of the claims, or in his own words, to extend the historical record beyond the Davidson biography by offering some additional first-hand comments. Rifle was based at a military-backed Armor Research Foundation in Chicago, now called the Illinois Institute of Technology Research. From May 1958 to January 1959, he and his team reported on the likely effects that nuclear blast would cause, including dust and gas behavior and the visual differences if the detonation occurred on the dark or light side of the moon. Although the exact delivery system of the nuclear device has never been divulged, Rifle claimed that it was technically feasible at the time to hit a target some 238,000 miles away on the moon with an accuracy of within 2 miles. Incredible. It's likely that feat would have involved an intercontinental ballistic missile, which the U.S. just so happened to have launched in 1959. The nuclear device would be an atom bomb, not a hydrogen, as the latter would have been too heavy for the missile to carry. Rifle stated in his 1959 report that had such a feat been accomplished, there would have been scientific and military benefits as well as the obvious political ones. This is all coming from history.com. He writes, it is clear and quite clear that many military objectives would be served since information would be supplied concerning the environment of space, concerning detonation of nuclear device testing in space, and concerning the capability of nuclear weapons for space warfare. So, they were going to nuke the bomb in the 1950s. So Sputnik was already a scare. World War II was just ended less than a decade later. A little over a decade earlier. And they were thinking about nuking the moon so that way America would know who's back on top. To me, that doesn't seem like such a good idea because there was so much mass panic and stuff going on back then. People were buying fallout shelters, and there's even this cartoon going around that was showing in schools, and you could find it on YouTube, and it is a turtle. There's a little turtle, and he's telling kids to duck and cover if a bomb went off. And it was just kind of like fear-mongering, and they wanted to put that at ease with nuking the moon, saying, hey, if we can't get there, nobody is. Right, that's the way I'm interpreting it. So can you imagine being alive back then? You've lived through World War II. You have Sputnik in space. You have these fear-mongering cartoons going around saying duck and cover if you see a bomb. And now they're talking about nuking the moon, but is going under flight research, lunar flight research. And they're covering all this up, but now it's unclassified. You can see these documents yourselves, and there's even not an autobiography, but a biography by a physicist who is there and worked on it. And when the book was released, the guy's boss was like, that's not good enough. I want to release some of my own comments and my own firsthand experiences and show it. Well, I, for one, if I was alive back then, I'd be thankful this was covered up. But man, what a crazy turn of events. So they have these scientific findings. The plan would be to place 3 identical instruments onto the moon's surface prior to the detonation. These instruments would then take a variety of measurements before, during, and after the nuclear explosion. So these instruments would go up there. They would do measurements before the explosion. So they'd send these instruments up, then they'd send the bomb up. The bomb would go off and do the measurements then, and then afterwards it would do the measurements again. So these findings would help Scientists learned more about the composition of the moon and its environment, as well as about our own planet. There was even a suggestion that a nuclear explosion might expose any kind of life on the moon. When the first project came to light in the late 90s, so all this happened in 1950s, the end of the 1950s, and 40 years later is when these came to light. Early news claimed that the nuclear device would have blown up the moon. So they were just wanting to set off an atomic bomb on the moon. But when the findings came to light, they were like, you know what? If they would have went through this, if we would have went through this, it would have blown up the moon. So in a 2012 interview with CNN, Rifle clarified that this was a gross misunderstanding of the facts. Absolutely not. It would not have been microscopic, so to speak, he said. It would have left a crater that would have been, I think, essentially invisible from Earth, even with a good telescope. So he's saying that, hey, it would just left a small crater. Nah. Although the blast would have been small in relative terms, fears of radioactive material contaminating the pristine lunar environment became a key reason as to why the project never got off the ground. The other major fear was of the uncontrollable. Any space venture comes with its fair share of uncertainties and risk, and the chance of nuclear device exploding prematurely within the Earth's atmosphere was not one to be taken lightly. The fallout, so to speak, would have been devastating in many regards. And I'm thankful for that. In the end, Project A119 was shelved, leaving Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to etch their names in the history of moon landings. Their accomplishment provided us with one remarkable, inspiring, and positive image of mankind's greatest ever feat of exploration. One giant nuclear blast for mankind was thankfully not meant to be. Again, this is from history.co.uk. You can find all the information there. And it's just outstanding. It goes a lot deeper into that. It talks more about how the Soviets were coming up and had a similar plan, and about the space treaty, and about how the Cold War documents remain under lock and key in the U.S. So you find all that in, like I said, you can look it up in it. I'm just using history out of the United Kingdom history.co.uk. And there's also a similar article on the New York Post about nuking the moon. So thankful we did not nuke the moon. And I don't know where you stand on the moon landing, whether it happened or not, whether it's staged or not. You know, it's no concern of mine. But one thing is for certain: at one time, we did try to nuke the moon, and then we tried to cover it up and label it as something else. Yeah, didn't really work out. And thankful for that. So, thank you for tuning in. Next time, we might drive into something a little more different. But until then, I hope you guys have a blessed day, a great week. And remember, Jesus loves you. And until next time, I'm Aaron Baker. Have a good one.